All right, in this video lesson for today, we are going to talk about solving a quadratic equation by factoring. And so first I want to talk a little bit about what does it mean when you're solving a quadratic? What is that finding for us? Well, that's actually going to tell us where the parabola crosses the x-axis, and this is going to be our x-intercepts. So if they tell you to find the x-intercepts, then that means you're going to solve that quadratic. And there's multiple ways to solve them. One way is factoring, that we're going to talk about today. Another way is using the quadratic formula. There's another method called completing the squares. And there is, of course, graphing. And so we're going to talk about probably most of those. I don't know if we'll have time to do the completing the squares, but today we're only going to focus on factoring to solve a quadratic. So of course it means to find where the parabola crosses the x-axis. Those could be called x-intercepts. Those could be called zeros. They could be called roots and solutions. So you just have to look at that problem carefully. Okay, see what the problem looks like and see what keyword they're using. And so they may say find the roots. And so that just means you're figuring out where it's crossing the x-axis, what those x-intercepts are. All right, so there's three different kinds of solutions we may come up with. You can have two answers or two solutions, and that happens when your parabola crosses the x-axis twice. Okay, so here's an example of a parabola that crosses the x-axis in two different places. And so that means it would have two solutions. And of course, parabolas we know can open up or down. And so if you have two intercepts, that means you have two solutions. You can also have a parabola just cross once. So say my parabola opens up and the vertex is on the x-axis. That means it's crossing only once. And again, the parabola could open downwards. You can have the same situation there. And then, of course, you could have no solution. And that happens if your parabola never crosses the x-axis. So maybe it's floating above the x-axis. And if I extend that parabola, it's never going to cross the x. And of course, you can have them shoot down as well. But be careful. If you graph something like this last one I just did, don't say, oh, it doesn't cross. It would eventually if you were to extend both sides of that parabola. So eventually it will cross. So just be careful, and if you're graphing them, that you extend your sides there if it's going to cross. And you should be able to tell if it's not going to cross. Oops. Got rid of my whole line here. Well, okay. So those are the three types of solutions. Of course, you can't have a parabola have three answers because there's no way a parabola can cross the x-axis 3, 4, or 5 times. It's only 2, 1, or none. All right, to solve by factoring, the first thing, it's very important, make sure your equation equals 0. And then you're going to factor it using one of the three methods that we have talked about in a previous video. You're either going to do GCF, difference of squares, or the bottoms up method if it's a trinomial. Then you're going to split your factors up and set each one equal to 0 and then solve each. So basically we're going to have two problems for the price of one. So let me show you what this looks like. The first example is 2x squared minus 11x equals 40. I know it's a quadratic because it contains the x squared. And it's an equation because of the equal sign. So I know I need to solve it. And so what I need to do is set it equal to 0. And the way we do that is you take that 40 and you're going to cross it over the equal sign. So your new equation is 2x squared minus 11x minus 40 equals 0. Anything that walks over the equal sign, you just change the sign. Make sure you put your equation in standard form with the x squared first, then the x, and then the constant. All right, so this is a trinomial, 2, 11, and 40. There is no greatest common factor. It doesn't have a difference of squares in it because it's not a binomial, and so therefore we're going to use the bottoms up method. And if you recall, the bottoms up method is when you multiply the first and the last term together. So 2 times 40 is negative 40. And I'm going to list the factors of 40. So 1 and 40, 2 and 20, 4 and 10, 5 and 8, and I believe that is all of them. And I'm going to subtract because of that minus sign up front. And I'm looking for a negative 11, or an 11 in this case. So when I subtract, I get 39, I get 18, I get 16, and I get 3. I'm missing one somewhere. Which one am I missing? Or did I subtract wrong somewhere? 39. Oh, actually, Miss Master, you guys are all yelling at me, aren't you? Jeez. Do I stop the video and redo it? Nah. I'm human, I make mistakes. 2 times 40 is negative 80. Oh, geez. So that's 1 and 80, 2 and 40. Does 80 get divided by 3? No. 4 and 20. 5 and 16. 8 and 10. I think that's all of them. All right, so now I can subtract and get 11, I hope. So when I subtract, I get 79, 38, 16, 11, and 2. So my winning numbers are 5 and 16. See, I am human. I make mistakes too, but at least I was able to find my mistake. All right, so x I get with a 5 and a 16. I need a negative 11, so a 5 and a 16, that would be a positive 5 and a negative 11, because I know that I'm going to keep the sign at the bigger number. So therefore, negative 16 plus 5 is negative 11. Don't forget to divide by your leading coefficient. So I'm going to divide by 2. 5 and 2 don't divide, so I bring my bottom up, and that gives me 2x plus 5. 16 divided by 2 is 8. All right, so I am done factoring. Took me a minute, but I'm done factoring. So now I'm ready to split my factors up and set them equal to 0. What does that mean? That means where those two parentheses are, you're going to draw a line there. Set each set of parentheses, which is a factor of that trinomial, equal to 0. Then you're going to solve the equation. So on the left side, I would subtract 5. So 0 take away 5 is negative 5. And then to solve for x, you would divide by 2. So x equals negative 5 over 2. On the right-hand side, you're simply going to add the 8. So x equals 8. Got it? Okay, good. Number 2. And all that means, let me go back and tell you what that means. That means I have a parabola that crosses at 8. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And negative 5.5, which is negative 2.5. And we know that this thing opens up, and we could actually determine its vertex, and we could talk about the y-intercept, which is all the way down here at negative 40, because that's my c value, and I could then find my vertex by doing negative b over 2a. But the important part for today's lesson is knowing that these two numbers that I just found are the x-intercepts. It is touching the x-axis at negative 2.5 and positive 8. So these are the roots, the solutions, the x-intercepts, the zeros. All right, let's take a look at number 2. Number 2 is already set equal to 0. And if you notice, I only have 2 terms. So I want to see if I have a GCF. What number can go into 3 and 15? If you said 3, you are correct. And don't forget about your variable. Do they both have an x? They do. Take the smallest one. You have 2 and a 1. Which one's the smallest? X to the first power. So looking at the exponents, the smallest exponent is a 1. All right, so my GCF is 3x. That's what goes on the outside of my parentheses. Remember to divide. 3x squared divided by 3x is x. Minus 15x divided by 3x is 5. All right, so I'm done factoring. The next step is to split up factors and set equal to 0. So here I only have one set of parentheses, but you still draw your line where the parentheses start. Set each side equal to 0 and solve. So on the left side, I have 3x equals 0. I'm going to divide by 3. 0 divided by 3 is 0. On the right side, I'm going to add 5. So x equals 5. So those are my two roots, zeros, or solutions. All right, so if you want to pause the video and see if you can try this number 1 and 3. I guess it's supposed to be number 1 and 2. Who knows? And that 4x should be squared. I don't know what happened there. I forgot to raise it when I typed it. All right, So hopefully you have paused it and you are coming back to us to see what the answer is. So I need to first set this equation equal to 0. So I would do that by subtracting the 21 to the other side. And so that gives me 4x squared minus 5x minus 21. 5, 4, and 21 don't have anything in common, so I'm ready to do bottoms up. So I'm going to multiply 4 times 21. So 4 times 21 is 84, and that's a negative 84. Factors of 84 are 1 and 84. 84 can be broken up 2 times 42. 3 and 28. 4 and 21. 5 can't go. 6 and 14. And some of you guys probably already see the 5, and that's okay because I'm just practicing. 7 and 12 with my factors. And I believe that's all I got. So now I am looking for a 5 when I subtract. How do I know I'm subtracting? Because of this minus sign here, and I'm looking for a negative 5. All right, so when I subtract, I'm looking for a 5, and that would be 7 and 12. Okay, so x something 7, x something 12. Some of you guys already know your signs, or you already did this, because that's right, you paused the video like you're supposed to. So you get a positive 7 and a negative 12, you should have. Then you're going to divide by your leading coefficient, which is a 4. Bottoms up, because I can't divide by 4 with that 7. 12 divided by 4 is 3. So I am done factoring. So now I am ready to split and solve. Set each side equal to 0. On the left, I'm going to subtract 7 and then divide by 4. So I get negative 7/4. On the right side, I'm going to add 3. So that's what you should have had. Did you get it right? Good job. Number 3, got to set it equal to 0. So I'm going to move that 16 over. So 4x squared minus 16 equals 0. Greatest common factor, I do believe I can divide both sides by 4. So I bring my 4 out. I get an x squared minus 4 equals 0. And then, if you remember, we have difference of squares. So I have x plus 2 and x minus 2. Because x squared is x times x. Got a minus sign, so I can split that up to a plus and a minus, and the square root of 4 is 2. So now I'm ready to split. And if you notice on this one, I can split it 3 places. But when I set them equal to 0, 4 equals 0 doesn't make sense, so we throw that one away. When I set the x plus 2 equals 0, I subtract 2 and I get negative 2. The next one I'm going to add 2 and get positive 2. Some students just remember to take the opposite of what's inside the parentheses, and they are correct. You could also have done this problem differently by saying 4x squared equals 16. Could have divided by 4, got x squared equals 4. Take the square root of 4 and you get 2, but that's only giving me one answer. So this is where you have to take the principal root, I believe it's what it's called, so you're going to take both, negative and positive 2. So just remember to do plus and minus when you are doing these square roots. So this problem, and that really works with any of your difference of squares. So there is a different way to do that, which is pretty cool. All right, let's take a look at some more examples. If you flip your paper over, I believe there are whole bunches here. All right, so number 1, we're going to solve each equation by factoring. Number 1's not set equal to 0, but I do like my x squared to be positive. So when I rewrite this, I would say x squared minus 6x plus 8. Because when you move over the equal sign, 6 becomes negative and 8 becomes positive. All right, this is a trinomial, so we're going to do bottoms up. First times last is 8. My factors of 8 are 1 and 8, 2 and 4. I'm looking for a 6, so that is 2 and 4. And they're both going to be negative because we know negative 2 and a negative 4 adds to give me negative 6. My leading coefficient was a 1, so I don't need to divide by 1 because when I do, it doesn't change anything. So I'm ready to split and solve. So x equals 2 and x equals, I forgot my x equals 4. All right, number 2, set it equal to 0. So n squared minus 4n equals 0. This is not a trinomial, so I'm not doing bottoms up. This is a binomial, so I'm looking for a GCF. It's not difference of squares because of the 4 has an n with it, but I do know that I can divide both by n. So this gives me n parentheses n minus 4. My GCF was an n. Split and solve, so n equals 0. Nothing to do there. And n equals 4. Number 3, set it equal to 0. So x squared minus 1 equals 0. No GCF, not a bottoms up problem, so that leaves me with difference of squares. So x plus 1, x minus 1 equals 0. Split and solve, x equals negative 1, and x equals positive 1. All right, so if you want to pause this video and do this whole worksheet, I can come back with the answers and see if you have done them correctly. I need to figure out how to speed up my videos like they do on, oops. Let me erase that. I'm not a good YouTuber yet, I guess, if I don't know how to modify my videos. This is going to be negative 7 and negative 2. And so k equals 7. When I split and solve, k equals 2. Hopefully you've gotten these correct. K squared, make sure you put it into standard form. So 5k would go in the middle there. Factor 14 and 5. That's another 7 and 2. Positive 7, negative 2. Split and solve. So k equals negative 7 and k equals 2. Make sure you only do split and solve when it says to solve. If it doesn't say solve, then you're not splitting and solving, you would just be factoring it. You also know to solve because it'll be an equation with an equal sign. N squared minus 12n plus 35. Factors of 35 that give me a 12. Well, that's 7 and 5, both negative to get a negative 12. Split and solve, add 7, and add 5. Forgot my equal zeros here. V squared plus 5v plus 6, set equal to 0. V plus 3 and v plus 2, because we know 3 times 2 is 6 and 3 plus 2 is 5. So v equals negative 3 and v equals negative 2. Difference of squares, x plus 2, x minus 2, split and solve. So x equals negative 2 and x equals 2. All right, and you guys can finish the rest of those off. I don't want to do all your work for you. And you also have another page that you will take and complete for me. And I would really encourage on that second page to do your work on a separate sheet of paper because there's really not enough room for you to do all this work. All right, let me know if you guys have any questions, and I will see you guys next time. Bye.